It's hard to keep my points concise. Before I mosey on over to the points that I'm trying to make, I'd just like to throw a bunch of tangential thoughts at the void and see if any of them stick. What do this game and this game have in common? One is a game that kind of flopped, a walking simulator. The other is primarily a close quarters combat game, and a fantastic one at that. The sword play is second only to what Wii Sports Resort could have been, and while the traversal is relegated to the background, you can use it in some pretty creative ways. If you've played both games, then you might know where I'm going with this. Traversing Death Stranding certainly looks like a lot of walking and nothing else, but if the game hasn't been cheesed to the point of BT genocide, it's incredibly immersive, and if you're not on the roads, it can demand a lot of focus from the player. Sekiro to the untrained eye just looks like another sword game like Zelda or its predecessor Dark Souls. I can say that from my own perspective, before I started looking into the game on a recommendation from a colleague who hadn't actually played it at that point. I honestly thought that it was some kind of beat 'em up like Devil May Cry or Dynasty Warriors. I don't know. I was wrong. To me, the standout similarity between these two games is that they really need to be properly experienced to be understood. The traversal in Death Stranding is a lot to me is is a lot like the parry mechanic in Sekiro, in that there's kind of a click moment where it kind of goes from being tedious or difficult in Sekiro's case to being one of the most fun things to do while you're doing it. Both games also start with the characters having nothing and not in the middle of the action, and that's really refreshing. I just thought I'd mention that. Sometimes video games will do something that's different, something that for better or worse really catches your eye when you're playing. Wolfenstein 3D and Doom did pseudo 3D first person shooting. Half-Life did seamless cutscene gameplay integration, and Far Cry 3 combined skill trees, crafting, hunting, towers, and an open world in a way that's fucking ruined the broader side of Ubisoft. Sometimes massive things fly right under the radar. Watch Dogs has an almost completely interactable world that was only improved upon in Watch Dogs 2. Wind Waker demonstrated a change of appearance that can only be bested by blunt force trauma to the face. And Far Cry 3 presented ludonarrative harmony that had never really been presented in a game where the main character kills actual hundreds of actual people.
You start killing in order to rescue your friends, but as you become better at it, your friends become scared of you.
You can really tell the criticism circle around the medium is toxic when phrases like ludonarrative dissonance get thrown around like slurs in the 60s, but the counterpart terms like ludonarrative harmony are very rare. I think I've only heard one person talk about it on the internet, and I don't remember who it was. Death Stranding isn't a perfect piece of art. I would probably say it's not that good a piece of art. It's easy to justify the argument that the writing was clearly more focused on high concept, big picture aesthetics than it was on staying competent and true to itself. I think that as a game, the mechanics and the loop are standout. They are fantastic. But as a general piece of art, it comes across as a well thought out but poorly executed story built on top of amazing foundational gameplay. There was something about Death Stranding that really seemed to fly under everybody's radar, but not mine. I've got them crackhead eyes. I can see time in slow motion and smell things worth talking about from 5 miles away. I'm not really recording this to talk in depth about the story of Death Stranding. I'm here to talk about Sam Porter Bridges. First up though, I'd just like to take a look at one piece of criticism about this game that really wound me up. For old time's sake.
The actors don't understand Death Stranding. Kojima doesn't understand Death Stranding. So why the fuck should I even bother?
The following advertisement is intended for
Donkey.
only.
It's free. Real estate.
We're giving you land.
It's free.
We're giving you a house.
It's real estate. Free.
It's a free house for you.
Donkey.
This is free real estate.
Well, you gotta bring furniture, but the house is
Free real estate. I'll pee my pants.
Donkey.
Come get your damn land.
It's a free house!
I
Donkey.
got real estate.
Donkey.
Get better than this?
Donkey.
The house is free!
Donkey.
The house is free!
It's a free house.
That line. You know that not all art has to be conceived with a message in mind, right? Like, you can just make art and see what kind of feelings it unearths. As a short-brained, non-intellectual beta male cook, I will now present 3 readings of what I think Death Stranding is about, or the messages that I took from playing it. The first one is
6.
the main game, taking into account that Kojima told us that he doesn't really know what the game's about. One reading could be that Sam trekking across America to connect all of the Cupid hubs to the chiral network reminds us that his work has already been done in our world. We're more connected to one another than we've ever been. When you criticize your children for being antisocial, for doing things like using their phones all the time, it's important to note that they're still being around people and they just prefer the company of these people to your company. They're probably socializing with their friends, and that is not a bad thing. We live in an age where company is essentially disposable, and for the first time ever we can choose who our friends are with seemingly no barriers that can come between us. We don't need to be next to one another to socialize anymore, and that is amazing. Further to this, there's the constant barrage from the uninformed, the notion of put your phone down and look around. Death Stranding inadvertently or purposely, for all I know, argues that we can have both. This is a hyper-futuristic world where people carry handcuff phones on their wrists, just like the metaphorical shackles that we use to speak to our friends, but the gameplay is mostly just taking in the scenery as you walk from A to B. The second idea is that Death Stranding tells us through the dead man / Frankenstein's monster analogy that something being something that was just made up or created doesn't equate to it being less important than the things that are real in the real world.
Your mission is to kill them, until you learn that these robots are simulating human society, monarchies, religions, even family structures with fathers and sons, mothers and daughters. Taro deals with themes of transhumanism, consciousness, and constructed meaning in doing this. That even if we make something up, that doesn't mean that it's not real on some level, or that it doesn't matter.
The stories that you write, the pictures that you draw, the songs that you sing, words, thoughts, numbers are all real because even an essence of a thought has existed for a moment in reality. The third idea is the one that I want to talk about today. Just fucking be nice to yourself.
EX grenade number 0.
It's the message that I took home. It's what I got when I looked past the convoluted world, the contrived plot and story, and the dialogue that seems like it was run through Google Translate 3 times before it was recorded.
Round and round it goes. Connect, reconnect, it's not that simple.
As a side note, the first song in Death Stranding is Don't Be So Serious by Low Raw. I wonder how many people have wondered how much of Kojima's games were supposed to take seriously. I know that people don't really talk like they do in Death Stranding, but this could just be a world where people just do talk like this. Would the writing still be a problem if that were the case? We can take from Death Stranding that this is how Monster Energy want us to consume their drinks. That's not even your recommended daily allowance, that's just one portion. I don't think this game was meant to be taken as seriously as Luke Stevens or the fucking Act Man seem to want to take it. Luke Stevens is fantastic, but come on, you can do better than you did with Death Stranding. The whole Kojima syndrome thing really fucked with me. As a concept, it's counterproductive and goes against what art and art criticism should be about.
Now, some people will say that this is just Kojima's style. They say this to defend the game's more eccentric design choices. But of all of the things to concede as weird design choices, it would be something like a planted ad while a character in the game goes poop. That seems like something we could all agree is a weird thing to include. But the hardcore Kojima fans will defend this as part of his style, and if you don't like it, you simply don't get it. Now, I don't need to explain ad nauseum the fact that this is an appeal to authority fallacy. It's completely incomprehensible, and in fact, it's the height of stupidity.
No.
It is the height of irrationality. Now, if you don't know what Stockholm Syndrome is, it's basically when somebody develops feelings of admiration or respect for someone with whom they should have negative feelings. So, I'm going to call what we're seeing with these sycophantic Kojima fans Kojima Syndrome. Maybe somebody else has come up with a name for this that's more fitting, but I'm calling it Kojima syndrome because it's like Stockholm syndrome, and I find it kind of funny.
You can watch my last video for my full thoughts on that, even though I doubt that's going to happen. Death Stranding seemed to contain one detail that really flew under everybody's radar, even though it really, really resonated with me. I felt it in my bones, like my body had been rung like a bell. You've probably only met a few people like Sam Porter Bridges. And I'm not talking about the bizarre combination of fighting ghosts and delivering posts, although you've probably never met anyone like that either. Sam Porter Bridges, and by extension Death Stranding, changed my life. Sam is the opposite of a lot of people. At the beginning of the game, his phobias really restrict how much he can connect with other people, and because of this he seems to have developed a somewhat apprehensive attitude to almost everybody. While Sam is confrontational with most of the people that he interacts with, at least face to face, he is shown to be unbelievably kind to himself.
He was toppled over.
Even though he acknowledges that nobody would miss him and he'd be better off dead, he says little phrases to himself such as "you've walked up worse" or "keep on keeping on" in the nicest possible way when he's faced with difficult terrain.
Yeah, just like that. Keep it up. Just you, yourself, and me.
Even when he scolds himself, it's obviously from a place of love and a drive to get the job done.
Eyes open, dumbass. Get it together.
It isn't like he trips on a rock and blurts out, "Oh my god, I fucking hate myself. Why am I even doing this? What is wrong with me?"
Of course.
He's also shown to have a pretty good sense of humour. When he's the only one around to laugh at his jokes.
Still got it.
It's portrayed through his eccentric movements in the safe houses, the peculiar expressions that he pulls in the mirror, and how he trashes his room after a couple of beers, knowing full well that Bridges or Fragile Express will clear it up. What really stands out for me in these interactions with himself is how much fun he seems to be having in his own company. He only really shows kindness to himself when he's on his own, and he only really shows that he's enjoying himself when he's on his own. Obviously this is characterization as an extension of his Aphenphosmphobia, but Kojima-isms aside, this extends outside of the safe houses too. For a man who spent so much of his time recently fighting and running from ghosts, thieves and actual fucking terrorists, what he's like when he's not under stress really shines through. He likes taking selfies and posing with the BB, he likes soaking in the views when he's outside of BT territory, and he likes to sit in the shelter and fall asleep outside in nature. He's a genuinely happy person when he's talking to himself instead of talking about himself. As another side note, it's taken me this long to realise that Sam probably connects with BB because she's in a pod and they can't touch. Not so much out of relatability, although I'm sure that's a factor, but because he doesn't need to worry about his phobias with her. It's not unreasonable to assume that he had to push himself really, really hard at the end of the game when he actually needed to take her out of the pod and touch her. Either that or the game doesn't handle the topic of phobias all too well. When I say Sam is the opposite of people, I'm really talking about myself and how I used to be. I've spent time as somebody who hates me. Not in the light-hearted schoolboy, "oh ho ho, I hate you mum, don't make me kiss my grandma's grandma on the mouth, she uses tongues" kind of hate. Just being so harsh and critical of my own decisions, actions and appearance that I could spiral into a full-blown self-loathing. I was never a horrible person in retrospect. Maybe a little insufferable or annoying. I don't think that I was ever a bad person though. This is just what mental illness can do to you. It can do it to you, me, your family, my family, anybody, really. On top of this deep hate that I direct towards myself was a surface desire to be liked by everybody. As though I could invalidate my self-perception by undermining my depressive tendencies with compliments and human interactions. At a point far into the depressive cycle, my negative thoughts of myself were like voices screaming in my ears about how I wasn't worthy of the company that I keep, and it's sad. The screaming drowns out any compliments someone can receive, such as "I like your shoes" or "thanks for helping me, you're a lifesaver." They just make you believe that these people don't know how much of a shitbag you really are, like whether you're a shitbag or not. Or maybe they do, and maybe they're just playing nice. Surely they must know that I'm not worth the effort. So present here an individual who on the surface presented themselves as extremely nice to anybody and everybody through a need for validation, yet without anything nice to say about themselves, someone who wants to connect with others. And I present the opposite, an individual who on the surface presents themselves as quite apprehensive and rugged to those around them, as though they don't need the validation of others because they know that they're a good person. Somebody who enjoys their own company more than the company of anybody else, apart from maybe the few people that they treasure. I'm sure that if you're not the former, then you know at least one person who fits this bill. I know a couple, but I don't know that many Sams. It's somewhat contrived, but Death Stranding kickstarted my journey out of a long-held spiral of depression. The thing is, though, Sam fixed his problem, and I fixed my problem. I love myself as a person in the same way that Sam Porter loves himself as a person, unconditionally. So what's next? Please learn to effectively read art before you try to criticize it, guys.